Hello everyone, this is R.S. Miller at the endtimenews.org and today is September 28, 2013. Israel reserves the right to act if a deal with Iran fails. The upcoming period is fateful for the Iranian nuclear program, and if an agreement with the Islamic Republic is not reached soon, Israel will take the necessary steps to defend itself and remove the threat, said Tzaki Hanegbi, a member of the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's ruling Likud party and a member of the Knesset's Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee. In an interview with Israel Radio on Saturday, Hanegbi warned that Israel has made it clear that it reserves the right to defend itself in the face of a nuclear threat from Iran, and that even President Barack Obama acknowledged this right. Obama knows that speeches end and that if no real solution is found to the nuclear dispute, Israel, as it has said in the past, will take necessary measures to defend itself, said Hanegbi. The military option is definitely still on the table, he added. Meanwhile, Iran will have enough uranium for a nuclear bomb in 2 months. Earlier on Friday, an Israeli newspaper quoted a government security source as saying that the Islamic Republic already has at least one nuke. Hours after that statement, Israel's leading Arab affairs analyst offered only a slightly less dramatic assessment, saying the regime in Tehran is no more than 1 or 2 months away from having a sufficient 92% enriched uranium to build its first bomb. Ehud Yari, the veteran analyst of Israel's top-rated channel TV2 News, added that Iran also had more sophisticated centrifuges becoming available soon that could cut the time down to just 2 or 3 weeks. Justice Minister Tzipi Livni, speaking from the UN, said the world should not melt in the face of Rouhani's new moderate rhetoric, and that it was vital that the international community not forget the imperative to stop Iran getting the bomb. Iran's foreign minister, Mohammad Javad Zarif, who held unprecedented talks Thursday with his U.S. counterpart John Kerry, posted a Facebook message saying Israel was isolated in its hard line on Iran. Under orders from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who himself will speak at the General Assembly on Tuesday, the Israeli delegation boycotted Rouhani's General Assembly speech last Tuesday, the only delegation to do so. Netanyahu has warned that the world should not be fooled by Iran's moderate rhetoric. Pakistan gets hit by another large earthquake. A 6.8 magnitude tremor has struck one of the most populated regions in Pakistan, the U.S. Geological Survey reports. It follows a deadly earthquake in Balochistan on Tuesday that left over 500 dead. The new tremor struck 96 kilometers northeast of Awaran district at 0734 GMT at a depth of 14 kilometers. The local meteorological office recorded the intensity of the earthquake at 7.2 on the Richter scale and said the epicenter of the quake was 150 kilometers southwest of the town of Kuzdar, which is home to over 500,000 people. It was not an aftershock, it was an independent earthquake, Zahid Rafi, director of the National Seismic Center of Pakistan, told GOTV. However, Pakistan's chief meteorologist, Arif Mahmood, told a local TV station that the tremor was an aftershock from Tuesday's earthquake and could be followed by further tremors for weeks to come. Tremors have been felt as far away as the Indian capital of New Delhi, NDTV reports. No new casualties or damage has been reported so far. Obama can invade any country for U.S. energy needs. In his dramatic speech in New York, Bolivian President Evo Morales called for the UN to be moved out of the U.S. and for Barack Obama to be tried for crimes against humanity.
Addressing the UN General Assembly in New York, Bolivia's President Evo Morales called for Barack Obama to be put on trial for crimes against humanity, blaming him for aggressive foreign policy. The RT Spanish channel managed to speak to him shortly after his comments. Well, here's what he said.
I want to remind you all that when Obama was elected president, he said that his aim was to end all wars. But during the time of his presidency, the number of wars only increased. Look at Libya, for instance. The U.S. organized an outrageous military intervention that was followed by the killing of the country's president. And after that, Libya's oil wells have fallen under their control. They finance rebels that fight against the rulers that don't support imperialism and capitalism. On top of that, they run a worldwide surveillance network. We need to establish a court where world powers and international human rights organizations take the role of judges. We need to file a collective lawsuit aimed at putting an end to this genocide. I think that the threat exists for any country with vast natural energy resources, especially oil and gas. I understand that this is a direct threat to Venezuela. In order to secure energy resources for his own country, Obama will invade any other country. But he's not the leader of the world.
UN Security Council passes chemical weapons resolution on Syria. The United Nations Security Council unanimously passed a resolution Friday backing a plan to turn Syria's chemical weapons stockpiles over to international monitors. It was the first time the divided council has been able to unite and pass a resolution related to the Syrian conflict, which has torn the country apart for over 2 years. U.S. officials are hailing the vote as a victory in the wake of 3 joint vetoes by Russia and China in the past 2 years. But the resolution, which President Barack Obama and other Western diplomats have been binding and enforceable, lacks the teeth the Obama administration has repeatedly called for. Secretary of State John Kerry and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov met in hastily scheduled closed-door talks Thursday afternoon to resolve several last-minute disputes over the text. Shortly afterwards, Lavrov said that Moscow and Washington had reached an understanding on the draft. The verge of World War III, or peace and safety. Friends, there is no peace in the Middle East, and there will never be any lasting peace until Jesus Christ returns and sets up his kingdom. The Middle East has been a hotbed of wars and conflicts ever since the creation of the State of Israel in May of 1948, and will ultimately culminate in the Battle of Armageddon. Back in 2012, the U.S. and allies were prepared to go to war over Syria's chemical weapons and Iran's nuclear ambitions. This war would have pitted the West and Israel against multiple Arab nations, as well as Russia, with China in a standby mode, which was indicated by their sending a single warship to the Syrian port of Tartus during the height of what was perceived as an imminent attack by the West. Just a few weeks ago, U.S. President Barack Obama prepared to strike Syria after nearly 1,500 people were killed in a sarin gas attack, which the U.S. and others insist was carried out by the Assad regime. Once again, this military action would have placed the United States in direct conflict with Russia. The potential for a shooting war to start between Russia and the U.S. once the strike on Syria had begun was at an all-time high and had not been seen since the end of the Cold War era. I don't think that most people even realized that the world was on the precipice of a thermonuclear war. Also in 2012, threatening rhetoric coming out of Moscow, along with its military strategic maneuvering over U.S. efforts to encircle Russia with anti-ballistic missile shields, helped exacerbate an already tense situation. While referring to a 2001 agreement between then-President Bush and the Kremlin, President Putin said, "The Russian Federation has fulfilled all terms of the agreement, and even more, I shut down not only the Cuban Lorderdes, but also Cam Ranh in Vietnam." I shut them down because I gave my word of honor. I, like a man, has kept my word. What have the Americans done? The Americans are not responsible for their own words. It is no secret that in recent years the U.S. created a buffer zone around Russia, involving in this process not only the countries of Central Europe, but also the Baltic states, Ukraine, and the Caucasus. The only response to this could be an asymmetric expansion of the Russian military presence abroad, particularly in Cuba. In Cuba, there are convenient bays for our reconnaissance and warships, a network of so-called jump airfields. With the full consent of the Cuban leadership on May 11th of this year, which was 2012, our country has not only resumed work in the electronic centers for Lourdes, but also placed the latest mobile strategic nuclear missiles on the island. They did not want to do it the amicable way, referring to the Obama administration. Now let them deal with this, Putin said. Now here we are, nearing the end of 2013, and suddenly it appears that there's a very real possibility of peace in the Middle East. Syria's President Bashar al-Assad has agreed to allow the international community to come in and dispose of his chemical weapons, thereby averting a U.S. military strike against his assets. The sudden and apparently inexplicable willingness of the Iranian leadership to come to the bargaining table and negotiate over their nuclear program, which had been stated multiple times before, was non-negotiable. Then we have the latest efforts to establish a Palestinian state alongside Israel, which at times looks like it could actually work. So exactly where are we in Bible prophecy? Well, that remains to be seen. But Daniel 27 says this, referring to the Antichrist, "Then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, which is a 7-year period, going on, but in the middle of the week, 3.5 years, he shall bring an end to the sacrifice and offerings, and on the wing of abominations shall be one who makes desolate." Bring an end to the sacrifice and offerings, and the abomination which makes desolate can only take place in the Jewish temple, which will be erected on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, which as yet hasn't happened. However, it may well be that permission to rebuild the temple becomes part of the peace plan for the establishment of a Palestinian state. But whatever the case may be, the Antichrist will stand in the temple of God and proclaim himself to be God and everything that is above God. At that point, the Jews are told to flee. In Matthew 24:15, Jesus said, "Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains." In verse 21, he goes on to say, "For then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever shall be." Now, I'm not saying that this is that time of the false peace of the Antichrist, but neither am I saying that the time is 20 or 30 years down the road. Most of the prophetic signs in the Bible have either been fulfilled already or are in the process of being fulfilled. A lot of the events we see in the daily news are major indicators that we are indeed living in the last days. It's unfortunate that many people don't even believe in the God of the Bible, much less any sort of apocalyptic end-of-the-world scenario. However, I would simply suggest that you keep your eyes open to the possibility, especially in light of current events which seem to line up with Bible prophecy. Investing just a little time to examine all the facts could well have incalculable benefits for the individual. And on the contrary, ignoring everything that happens now, or simply accepting the common world view, which in most cases totally excludes God from the picture, is a little like seeing smoke, but refusing to consider that a fire is the root cause. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 3, the Bible states, "For when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them as labor pains upon a pregnant woman, and they shall not escape." We are living in the last days, and the evidence of Bible prophecy being fulfilled is written in the daily news headlines. We are rapidly approaching the time of the rapture, the revealing of the Antichrist, the mark of the beast, and the Great Tribulation period. Are you saved? Follow the link in the box below and pray a simple prayer of salvation with a sincere heart, and you will be saved. May God bless you.